Hello everyone, welcome back to AITechone.com, your one-stop destination for all things Salesforce and GraphQL API. So if you are a Salesforce enthusiast or a developer and you would like to level up your skills, so this channel is just for you. So from today onwards, we will be going to start a you can say new playlist or new series of videos. And in this series of videos, you will be exploring how GraphQL is revolutionizing the way we interact with Salesforce data, making API integration smoother, faster, and more efficient. So from this channel, what you can expect in-depth tutorials, real-world use cases, hands-on demos, and I will be going to demonstrate you various tips and tricks through this video channel. So whether you are a new to Salesforce or you are a seasoned pro, our content is designed to help you stay ahead in fast evolving space. So if you are ready to master GraphQL API, make sure to subscribe my channel AITechone.com and hit the notification bell icon so you never miss an update. And if there's any specific topic you would like to cover, you can drop your ideas in the comment below. We would love to hear from you. So let's embark on learning together, our learning journey together. And welcome to AITech1.com community. So I'm going to start a new video series, and the topic is mastering Salesforce, or you can say Salesforce and GraphQL API mastery. That's the topic for this channel. And in this tutorial, I will be going to I will be going to give you an overview about GraphQL APIs. How do we create GraphQL? What is GraphQL? How do we use GraphQL queries in order to make queries or to get the data from Salesforce, and how do we perform the data manipulation operations onto Salesforce by using GraphQL, which is actually known as a mutation. So by the end of this video series, you will have a clear understanding how GraphQL can enhance your projects and make your applications more efficient. So let's start. Let's begin. So first of all, let's try to understand what is GraphQL. So you might have seen this, or basically GraphQL. What is GraphQL? Who started the GraphQL? What is the GraphQL? So basically, GraphQL, or in a layman language, GraphQL is a kind of query language and server-side runtime technology used widely in application programming interface of APIs that ensures that the client gets the required data, nothing else or nothing more. So in a simple language, if I'll explain this in a simple language, GraphQL query, it is used to query the data which is required. It is not going to return the unused data or unrequired or not required data. And the QL is the name stands for the query language. So as you can see here, Salesforce GraphQL in the Salesforce ecosystem offers a more efficient, flexible way to query and manipulate the data. And this is a query language for the APIs that empowers developers to request the exact data they need from a server in a single request. Those who are developers, they know that if you want to make an API call, or if you want to request an API call from external applications to Salesforce, or REST API request, for every new requirement, we require a separate. We need to provide a separate API call, separate endpoint. Whereas in GraphQL, by using a single request, we will be able to extract the data. So it requests the data they need from a server in a single request. We do not need to provide multiple endpoints to the third-party developers in order to query the data from our Salesforce. It's a new way to address many pain points for application developers. It's an open specification backed by a diverse community that has success at high scale. So GraphQL is in demand these days. GraphQL, it was created in, now the question comes that when the GraphQL is introduced, so GraphQL was created, or it was designed by Facebook in the year 2012 while crafting the Facebook application. And now gradually GraphQL will be used by other technologies as well. And Salesforce has also incorporated GraphQL in within it. So it serves a powerful data fetching API interface that easy to learn. It's an open source query language, which making API fast and flexible. And it's a way to give experts the ability to develop API with desirable methods. So all in all, all in all, GraphQL is here to empower the API development and keep the API safety troubles as less as possible, as this query language grants full freedom to the API developers to play on the front foot and shape APIs as per their wish. So the developers, basically the API developers, they can query the data they want. They do not need to. They don't require if even okay. They don't. They can query only the required information. Okay. I'll give you an example for this. Usually, what happens whenever any REST API request will be made, so so the Salesforce or the application will return back all unnecessary information which is not required. But using GraphQL, we will be getting only that much information. We can request only that information which will be required. So we can only query the required information from the data source by using GraphQL. Now the GraphQL can run on GraphQL can be run by using we can run GraphQL client from a mobile phone, from a laptop, or from a tab. So there is no specific there is no specific device that GraphQL can work only on a specific device. It can work on all the devices available. So now the basics of GraphQL is clear to you. Now it's time to learn about it, modus operandi. Here are the steps that any GraphQL user need to follow to make this powerful query language work. First of all, designing of the GraphQL schema, connecting the resolvers to available data sources, write query for the things you want. These are the main important things which we always need to take care of. Now the question comes that how GraphQL is different from the REST operation. When we already got the REST operation, REST API is already there. Then why should we go for why do we need GraphQL in that? What's the reason behind that? So let's try to understand the difference between the REST versus GraphQL. And for before this, I will be going to show you this image. Now, if you look at this image, so you can see here, if we are working with a REST operation, so we retrieve multiple resources, required multiple queries. So, for example, if we will be fetching data from, if we'll be requesting multiple data, multiple information, so we require multiple queries or multiple endpoints. So, for example, if I want to fetch the data from an object, from a Salesforce object. And initially, I just want to fetch the data from an account object. Later on, I want to fetch the data from a contact object, from an opportunity. So for three different objects, we require three different endpoints to generate it. Whereas in GraphQL, a single query can help to retrieve the data from multiple resources. That's the use of GraphQL. So the client can, by using a single endpoint, by making a single call or by using single endpoint with the help of GraphQL, the client can request the data. So let's try to understand this more that GraphQL has a specific endpoints or resources for the entire block of data. REST uses different data endpoints. So this I've mentioned you just now. Now, in order to get the data, so there's a get method to add a data. There's a post method to update the data. There's a patch method to delete the data. There's a delete method. Whereas in GraphQL, it only uses one single method and one single endpoint will need to be hit. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you the syntaxes also. We'll see the examples for that. What all syntax will be there and what syntax you need to write. GraphQL works around schemas, queries, and resolvers that allow one to work with a specific piece of data. On the other hand, what you ask for will reach you passing by different REST APIs in the case of REST. And REST is a type of architecture pattern, while GraphQL is particularly a query language. So you can understand this. It's an architecture pattern where when we say GraphQL, it's a graph query language. And API development is faster in GraphQL when compared to REST. So this is the difference between the REST versus GraphQL. Let me let me give you more differences between the GraphQL and REST API. So I hope this table will help you to understand the difference between. This will make you clear the difference between the GraphQL and the REST API in the form of architecture, in the form of operations, stability, use cases, and many more. So, as an architecture, so GraphQL is a client-driven architecture, and the REST API is a server-driven architecture. Operations, query, mutations, subscriptions, whereas in the REST API, will be using read, create, update, delete. So in GraphQL, we have only query and mutation. So query is to query data, mutation is to update the data. Whereas in REST API, we have create, read, update, and delete. Data fetching with a single API call, but we need to fix the data with multiple API calls. This is one of the major difference which makes GraphQL unique from the REST API and most commonly used language these days. Performance will be faster as comparative to REST API, and development speed will be rapid. File uploading is available, whereas in the REST API it is not available. And if I say web caching via libraries built on top, it's available in REST API. If we talk about the stability, less error prone, automatic validations and type checking, whereas the better choice for complex queries. So if we are going for a complex queries, then we prefer to use the REST operations. But if we want less errors, automatic validations and type checking, then we will go for GraphQL. Now, what could be the use cases? So simple applications and resource-driven app will be using REST API, but if we are creating multiple microservices and mobile apps, we'll be going with the GraphQL. And the community is growing, and its REST API is very old, pretty old, and GraphQL is not pretty old, so it's growing faster. But definitely in coming future, most of the technologies they will switch onto GraphQL. So now the next is the benefits of GraphQL. So these are the benefits of GraphQL. The first is the data fetching, and client can request only the specific data they need, avoiding overfetching or underfetching common in REST APIs. So in REST API, it is very common that when we query the data, so we'll be able to get all the information, even though that much information is not required. But in GraphQL, we can only request the specific data that will be needed. Single endpoint, GraphQL operates on a single endpoint, that is the GraphQL for all queries and mutations. So we don't require multiple endpoints in GraphQL. Flexible and customizations, client can query multiple resources in a single request, tailoring the response to their exact needed. Schema-driven development, it uses a strong type-safe schema to define the API structure. And real-time data with subscription, built-in support for subscription allow real-time data updates using web stocks. So here are the benefits of using GraphQL. Now the next we have is the when to use GraphQL. That's a very important question that which will be asked by the which will be usually asked by the developers, that why do we go for a GraphQL, when to use GraphQL. So as I mentioned, that GraphQL is a powerful query language and runtime for the APIs. So it is suited for the scenarios where flexibility and efficiency in data retrievals are priorities. So here are some points which will help you to decide that when to use GraphQL, when you need the precise data fetching. So it allows the client to request exactly the data they need, no more, no less. And I can give you a use case on this. The use case is a mobile app required only specific fields from a complex API to minimize the payload size and improve the performance. Second is when you have complex relationship between entities. So GraphQL excels in complex querying, interconnected data in a single request, and it can traverse relationship between entities without requiring multiple endpoints. And what would be the use case? A social media platform where you need to fetch a user, their post, comments on those posts and reaction in a single query. So instead of writing multiple endpoints, we want to query everything by using a single query. When your API need to evolve without breaking clients. So what would be the use case for this? let's suppose we will be building an API for a SaaS product. SaaS means a ready to use product that frequently introduce new features, and you want to avoid breaking the client application. So it keeps on updated. And so basically, so GraphQL allows it helps or it allows for adding fields and types without impacting the existing queries, which make it highly adaptable for evolving the business needs. uh, when performance optimization is a priority, obviously we want when the performance optimization is a priority, so the GraphQL, it reduces the number of API calls by aggregating data into a single query. So you might have experienced till so far, since we have started the introduction about GraphQL, everywhere I'm talking about that single query. That means GraphQL only runs one query, or one endpoint will be used in order to fetch all the data from all the from within an application. So okay, so this improve the performance, especially in high latency network. So okay, what would be the use case for this? Let's say there is an e-commerce site and they want to fetch the product details, reviews, and recommendation in a single request instead of multiple REST calls. Instead of executing multiple REST call, a single API call, a single call will help. When you want better client-server interaction, so GraphQL provides powerful client-server interaction through features like subscriptions for real-time updates. And what would be the use case for this? A stock trading platform that pushes real-time prices updates to the client. And the last is when your API consumer demands aggregated data. So obviously we need the aggregated data. So for example, and a travel booking service that combines the flights, hotels, and car rental from different providers at one single place. You might have seen a website called there's a very popular website nowadays. It's a GoIbibo, or there are many other websites like when you visit those portals, and it will compare the prices, and it will give you a list of all the prices from different websites. So this will help us a lot. So now let me give you a demonstration of GraphQL query. How do we write a simple GraphQL query in order to fetch the data from an object, from a Salesforce object? Now, in order to do this, there are various tools available. We can use Postman tool in order to write a query. So I will be going to show you how do we write the query from a Postman. And also there's a tool or there's an extension available for the Chrome that is called Attire, which is a commonly used platform. And that platform will help us to quickly write the GraphQL queries. So it doesn't matter which editor you will be using. We can write the GraphQL queries by using Visual Studio Code also. So there are multiple editors available. So you can choose any editor you want. Let me share my screen, and as you can see, I'm on my Salesforce org, and in front of your screen, you can see I'm using a product. There's a tool called Altair GraphQL Client. So it's a Chrome extension, and what you have to do, you need to install or you need to configure this Altair GraphQL Client on your desktop, on your system, and then once you do that, you will get an option here called Altair GraphQL Client. This is the Altair GraphQL Client, and Altair GraphQL. So here's an Altair GraphQL client. So this is see this, debugging your GraphQL server was never easy. And this will help you to generate your GraphQL queries and test your GraphQL queries. Fine. So, and here you can see here are the various extensions. So we have the extension available for Linux, for Mac, for Chrome, for Windows, for Firefox, or Edge, or web. So doesn't matter which browser you will be using, this entire tool, this client will be available for all the browsers. So in my case, I have already downloaded and installed this entire GraphQL client in my desktop, and that's why I'm able to see an extension here. So how we are going to use this? So for this, first of all, I just click on Altair GraphQL client, and it's going to open in a next tab. So as you can see, it's opening here right now, Altair GraphQL client. And in this entire GraphQL client, how are we going to start? So because this is an external tool, so in order to make a query, first of all, we need to establish a connection. So how are we going to establish a connection from entire GraphQL client to Salesforce? So for that we required connections. So how do we do this connection? How do we implement all these connections? So that I will be going to discuss in our next session. So in session 2, I will be going to cover this. So today I will be going to just demonstrate you a very simple query, how to write a query in order to how to design a GraphQL query in order to fetch the data. So let's see how do we write a GraphQL query in order to fetch an account record. And you can see it's an editor. So it says welcome to entire GraphQL client, and we can send a request using command or control enter. So I'll just remove this one, and I'm going to create my query. Before that, let me show you the SOQL query for the same. And my requirement is I would like to fetch the account name, ID name, and phone from the account object. So the simple, how do we write SOQL query for that? We used to write, this is my developer console. I just write select ID, comma, name, comma, type. Let's say ID, comma, name, comma, phone from account. And when I execute this, I will be able to see my result. Okay, it's saying session expired or invalid. So no worries. Let me refresh that because it get expired. So query editor, select ID, comma, name, comma, phone from account and execute this. And I'm able to see the data. So this is the data I'm getting here. And I just wanted to replicate the same thing by using GraphQL. So let's see how do we write a GraphQL query. And in order to do this, what we have to do, very first step is we always need to start with a query keyword, query. Query basically because we are going to query the records from the object. So in GraphQL, it provides two types of functionalities, query and mutation. Query is for querying the data, and mutation if you want to perform DML operations like create, update, or delete operations. So then we'll be using mutation. So that will be going to cover in our later videos. So query, and here we have to give a query name. So the way we used to write the method name, we used to give the method name in Apex class. So in same manner, we need to specify a query name. So I'll give this query name as, let's say, get account record. That's my query name. We have to start brackets. Now the best thing about entire GraphQL client is as soon as I press my control tab, I will be able to get the help from here. So as I mentioned, the reason behind using entire GraphQL client is it gives us suggestions, it gives us help, actually provide helps in order to write the next step. So here, when I press control tab, I'm getting this option, and from here we have to select UI API curly bracket. And the best way to write this query is always to format this, always whenever we write any command, always start and close the curly braces. Then we write here query. Here we have to specify the object name, from which object we want to query the data. So I want to query the data from account object. Then here we need to specify the edges, node. Now, within the nodes, we need to specify the fields whose data we want to fetch. So I just want to display ID. We don't have to specify any comma and all. Simply press enter, move to the next line and next field. The next field I want to display here, as we are displaying ID, name, and phone. So I want ID, name, and the next field I want is phone. Now, when I execute this, when I say send request, at first time it will throw a validation error. Now, why are we getting a validation error here? What's the reason? So there is a specific format which we need to follow while working on GraphQL. And what's that? Except ID field, whether we use a name field or phone field, or it's a double field, or it's a text field, or a checkbox, or pick list, any field we will be using. Okay, any field we'll be using. We always need to specify its value, except the ID. For ID, we don't need to fetch value, but for the name, for the phone, or for any other field we are going to add here, we need to fetch its value. So as you can see here, we are getting the label, value, and display values. So what is the value? Value is the exact value. Label is what label has been assigned, and display value, if display value will be useful, especially when we'll be using the currency field. So in currency field, we can specify the display value. It gives us the currency format. So you can say the string type, the string scalar represents. So I just pass here value. I give value, name value. For phone also, I need to give value. And when I send request, you can see my query get triggered successfully, executed successfully, and I'm able to get the records. This is how we need to write GraphQL query and test it. So in the next video, in video 2, we will be going to see, first of all, I'll explain how do we connect this GraphQL client with the Salesforce, how do we establish a connection, that we'll be going to discuss. And then I'll explain you how do we write, how we'll write more queries into this, how do we add filter. So the topics we are going to cover in this series, we'll be going to cover the query part, we'll be going to cover the mutation part. If you need some help, you can go to documentations, and it will give you help also. For queries, we can see all the queries, UI API. We can get a proper structure also. How do we run aggregation? How do we work on object infos, related this by name, or if you want to do mutation, so we have a mutation option. So we'll see mutation also, entry point for create, update, and delete operations from this. So that all will be going to cover in this tutorial series. So don't miss this, and keep connected to this. So keep connected to this, and yes, as I mentioned, don't forget to like this video and share it with your fellow Salesforce developers and enthusiasts. See you in the next videos, where we'll dive right into GraphQL basics for sales. Until then, happy coding and stay inspired. That's all for the day. Have a nice day, everyone. See you in next video. Bye.